Hamas, which the UK has designated as a proscribed terrorist organisation, says it has released 2 American hostages being held in the Gaza Strip. Reports in Israeli media say that a mother and daughter have been handed over to the Red Cross. We are still waiting for official confirmation, and the pair have not yet been identified. Well, let's get the latest from our foreign affairs correspondent, Sikander Kamani in Tel Aviv, and our Washington correspondent, Siobhan Kennedy. But first to you, Sikander.
Well, Matt, Hamas and Israeli officials are saying that an American mother and daughter who were held hostage have been released after being taken to the Gaza Strip by Hamas. Hamas have said that it was done following Qatari mediation. Now, they're already said to have been handed over to the Red Cross and are being taken to Egypt and then to Israel. Israeli forces say a total of 203 people have been confirmed as having been seized as hostages by Hamas. Hamas have said that the figure is somewhat higher than that. So this is just a small proportion of those being held. But of course, it's a massive deal for the family of those who are being released. And it's crucially a first sign that diplomatic efforts are achieving something. Israeli media here is saying that the release of these hostages was done unilaterally. In other words, it wasn't done in exchange for a release of Palestinian prisoners. That's something that Hamas has talked about in the past, though they've also talked about being willing to release some foreign nationals. Israeli state media also saying, citing unnamed sources, that they believe that this release of hostages is an attempt by Hamas to delay an imminent expected ground offensive by Israeli forces into the Gaza Strip. A number of other foreign nationals are being held by Hamas, including Brits and Americans. Some of them will be dual nationals. There are many other Israeli hostages, including very elderly people, very young babies being held. All of their families are desperate for information, and all of them, I think, will treat this news as giving them a glimmer of hope in a dire situation.
Indeed they will. Sikander in Tel Aviv, thanks very much. Let's go straight to Siobhan Kennedy in Washington. Siobhan, this must become a very welcome relief to the Americans. What are they saying about this?
Well, just a quick reminder, Matt, that when Joe Biden spoke to the nation last night, he reminded them that he was pursuing, he said, every avenue to bring their loved ones home. As president, he told them there is no higher priority for me than the safety of Americans held hostage. So the news that 2 Americans have been freed, I have to say, will be extremely welcome news here. It is running across all the networks, as you can imagine. I should say that we have had no confirmation yet from the State Department or the White House. There is a briefing from the State Department in about an hour's time. But we do know, Matt, that among the 20 or so Americans that we know are still unaccounted for, that there is a mother and daughter by the name of Judith and Natalie Raanan, who are from the suburbs of Chicago and who are believed to be among those held hostage. Their family have told us that they do believe that they were taken 2 weeks ago. They had traveled to Israel to celebrate a relative's 85th birthday and to celebrate the Jewish holiday season, and they had been sending updates, photographs to their families, to Natalie's brother that was left behind here. He lives in Denver in Colorado, but then suddenly their messages, those photos stopped, and it coincided with those attacks on the morning of October the 7th. Well, earlier I spoke to the family's rabbi in Chicago, who is a close friend of the mother, Judith Hanan, and he told me that the family had heard the news today, that they were all together in a room and hoping and praying that it was indeed their loved ones, Judith and Natalie Hanan, who have been released. They have not as yet had that confirmation. They are waiting for that confirmation. But as I said, if they get that confirmation, this is very clearly amazing news for them, extremely welcome news, both for the family and for America and for the President Joe Biden.
Siobhan in Washington, thank you very much indeed. Well, along with the very real and violent war on the ground, there is also a fierce information war. Case in point, Tuesday's explosion at the Gaza hospital, which Hamas says killed hundreds of people. Israel says it was a misfired Islamic Jihad rocket, which they deny. Hamas says it was an Israeli airstrike, which they deny. But tonight, forensic architecture, Earshot, and the Ramallah-based NGO Al-Haq have shared new information with Channel 4 News they say casts doubt on some aspects of Israel's account. Here's our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson.
It derailed Joe Biden's Middle East visit. It started a raging global debate. The explosion at the hospital in Gaza City on Tuesday night and its bloody aftermath. Tonight, audio and photographic analysis sheds new light on what happened. First, the audio analysis. This comes from a consortium of prominent NGOs specializing in human rights investigations. Earshot investigators have analysed two aspects of the blast which killed so many at the Christian hospital. First, Doppler effect sound analysis of the missile tracking to the hospital that night.
It's the compression of sound waves as a moving object is accelerating towards you, and that object is emitting sound, and then as it's moving away, that frequency decreases, that pitch decreases.
That analysis produced this mapping. The red line is where the Israelis said the missile was fired from by, they say, Islamic Jihad from within southwestern Gaza. But this new Doppler sound mapping analysis concludes that the missile came from a variety of possible firing points, the blue arrows, all east of the hospital, not west, as the IDF claimed. That map arose from this Doppler mapping of the audio of the missile flying to impact at the hospital. And that sound recorded by a geolocated eyewitness 150 meters southeast of the hospital. The second aspect examined is the tape released by the Israeli Defense Forces. The IDF says it is two Hamas operatives discussing how an Islamic Jihad missile fired from in Gaza malfunctioned, causing the hospital explosion. 2 nights ago, we reported that Arab-speaking experts raised questions about the tone and language of this tape. The forensic sound analysis states, quote, "This recording is made up of 2 separate channels and demonstrates that these 2 voices have been recorded independently. These 2 independent recordings have then been edited together in a digital audio workstation, such as Pro Tools, Logic, Audition, have added effects, such as pan control, and recomposed." That being their analysis, what do they then conclude? Though this audio analysis cannot categorically state that the audible dialogue is fake, we can say that the level of manipulation required to edit these 2 voices together disqualifies it as a source of credible evidence. Earshot's opinion is that this recording does not meet the standard required for evidence and should not be used by the media without the clear caveat that it has been digitally manipulated. We turn now to the image analysis carried out by Forensic Architecture at London University. They've conducted 3D resolution of the impact strike crater and shrapnel splash marks in the hospital car park. Those radial fragmentation marks open towards the southwest, with a shallow channel leading to the crater from the northeast. Their conclusion matches the audio analysis of the missile track. They say whatever hit the hospital car park that night was fired from the northeast and not from the southwest of Gaza, as the Israeli Defense Forces claim.
We also shared this with an independent weapons and explosives expert that corroborated our understanding of the likely direction as coming from the northeast.
They stress this is a preliminary investigation, and they, like many, call for a full inquiry, unlikely in the heat of raging war. Hamas and Islamic Jihad have so far offered little evidence to back their claims that Israel fired the missile at the hospital that night. Islamic Jihad claimed to have a missile fragment, but have not produced it. And the US agrees with Israel's version of events. We've approached the IDF for comment.
Our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson, reporting. Well, missiles have continued to fly today in both directions, with more than 100 targets struck overnight in Gaza, while Israel has begun evacuating residents near the Lebanese border after Hezbollah and Hamas fired a barrage of rockets there. The United Nations chief Antonio Guterres has said that he expects aid trucks to begin crossing into Gaza in the next day or so, as he visited the blocked Rafah crossing point to Egypt, describing it as the difference between life and death. Kieran Mudley has a roundup of today's events and a warning there are some distressing images in his report.
Through a crack in this damaged church compound, a sign of hope, a survivor risen from the rubble. Palestinian officials said Muslims and Christians had been sheltering here, hoping that this Greek Orthodox church in Gaza might offer sanctuary.
Look at the martyrs, the wounded, the churches and the hospitals. Where is the Arab world?
The Orthodox Church said its compound was hit by an Israeli airstrike. Israel said it was targeting a nearby Hamas militant base. The death toll has now risen to more than 4,000 in Gaza, according to Palestinian authorities. When combined with the Israelis killed, nearly 5,500 have died since the Hamas attack of October 7th. Rockets continue to be fired into Israel from Gaza, while the Israeli Defense Force carries on pummeling the Strip, claiming they've now hit 100 Hamas targets. Israel's defense minister said this was stage 1 of 3, with the next 2 being a ground invasion and the elimination of Hamas.
The next stage will take more time, which will be stabilizing the system, and eventually we'll reach the point when there is a completely different security regime and there is no threat from within the Gaza Strip. This will not take a day nor a week, and unfortunately not a month.
As the Israelis prepare for their second stage, Gazans are still waiting for their first delivery of humanitarian aid. A convoy of more than 50 trucks stuck at the Rafah crossing between Egypt and Gaza. President Biden said Israel had promised to let the aid enter, as long as none of it reached Hamas. But there's still no movement, and so with protesters gathering at the border, the UN Secretary General spoke.
These trucks are not just trucks. They are a lifeline. They are the difference between life and death for so many people in Gaza. And to see them stuck here makes me be very clear. What we need is to make them move.
As the vehicles lie motionless, world leaders are anything but. Israel yesterday, Egypt today for Rishi Sunak, speaking to President Sisi, as well as the Palestinian leader. Mahmoud Abbas has little power over events in Gaza, but he and other world leaders are meeting tomorrow in Cairo for a peace summit, as they try and prevent this conflict spreading, with ominous signs on Israel's northern border with Lebanon. Continuing skirmishes between Israel and the Iran-backed militia Hezbollah. While for now contained, Israel did today order the evacuation of one of its largest towns along the Lebanese border. And it's not just to the north of Israel. Yesterday, this US warship, now based in the Red Sea, took out missiles fired by Houthi forces in Yemen. Those rebels are backed by Iran, and some have been trained by Hezbollah fighters.
We cannot say for certain what these missiles and drones were targeting, but they were launched from Yemen, heading north along the Red Sea, potentially towards targets in Israel.
As all sides brace for whatever comes next, the pain of now is still so strong. The families of missing Israelis set an empty Shabbat dinner table in Tel Aviv. With reports of 2 hostages being released today, some hope. But this war has changed so many lives. With rows and rows of tents in Khan Yunis in Gaza, filled with Palestinians having lost their homes or forced to flee south ahead of Israel's coming ground invasion. A displacement reminiscent of 75 years ago, in a conflict with no clear solution, just suffering.